Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Chad Vaughn, and on today's episode, we have Travis Mayer. Travis is an incredible athlete in the CrossFit community, having competed at the CrossFit Game as an individual 7 times. Most recently, he placed 12th at the CrossFit Games in 2021. Talk a little bit about that experience, as well as being a dad of 4 little kids, all under 6 years old, as well as owning a gym down in Georgia, how he balances all those things and still being an elite athlete, what it's like to have his coach from Training Think Tank being based out of his gym, and what a benefit that has been in terms of his training. We go into a lot of other things, his background in motocross, as well as what his upcoming season is looking like. It was great talking with Travis. It's the first time we've had a chance to sit down with him. Really enjoyed the conversation. Hope you guys do too.
Travis, well, man, I'm a big fan of tattoos. Of course, I've got a little sleeve similar to yours. So as I'm doing a little research, I'm just fixated on your sleeve and your other tattoos there. And I keep looking at those, and I'm wondering, the one that's most apparent to me is some sort of a cat. Now, is that a tiger or a lion?
So it's a lion. Yeah. So then each arm is kind of like portion of my arms have like been for each of my kids. And so now that we have a 4th one, I'll most likely end up on the other side too. But they each kind of have like their own meanings and different things around them. But the one that you're seeing is like the lion. And then so like ideally I'm the lion, my son is the cub, and then on the other side is like an elephant and a female lion, and that's like for my wife's side, and then the inside is for my boy, one of my boys.
Gotcha. Love it. So I was going to ask what your next tattoo will be. So will it be for the new baby?
Yes, but that I don't know. So I have 3 boys, and this one is a girl, and so I'm not really sure yet what's going to happen. And the guy that does them is now in Canada. So he was in Spain, and I met him in New York to do the other one, and now he just moved to Canada. And so then with like travel and everything else right now, it's kind of like, can I get into Canada? Like, what's kind of actually going on? How long am I going to be there for it? So once things probably calm down a little bit, and maybe after Rogue in Dubai, we'll kind of see what it's like, and then I'll kind of decide what's going to happen. But I like to give them like an idea and frame of around what I want, and then just kind of let them do what they're good at. And usually they turn it into something pretty cool. There's only been one time where I gave the guy freedom, and I looked at it and I was like, no, I can't do this. And I sent it to my wife, and she was like, don't you even dare think about getting that tattooed on you. And I was like, all right, I'm going to leave, and I will come back and reassess this.
Did he put the stencil on, or did you just looked at the drawing?
Oh no, he just drew it, and then I showed her, and she immediately was like, no. I mean, it wasn't like my favorite, but I was like, you can just get it. And then thank God I didn't. But it's just I kind of forgot even completely about that. But yeah, he was just like, no, I'm going to have to leave. And he's like, what? And I was like, yeah, my wife doesn't approve of this, and I really don't want to keep sitting here. I think this is a better bet that I'm just going to walk away. Here's for the consult stuff, I'll pay you. But other than that, I'm walking out.
Absolutely, man. That's going to be stuck on you forever. What was your most painful tattoo?
I feel like they're all painful in like a different way. Like they all kind of have like certain areas, like when they go, so the one on my forearm, like from both sides, was about 26, 27 hours. And
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, we started at like 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, and then didn't finish till like 1:30 at night. And I mean, he's like, oh, you want a break? And so his English is a little off, and so like he's like, you want a break? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then like 5 minutes goes by, he's like, you ready? And I'm like, okay, let's go again. But like it would be when he would go back over and wipe, like after he would do it. And so after like 6-7 hours, I was like, okay, like, can you just move or like something? But he just kept wiping, and I was like, oh. But then I don't know, my side was, when my ribs were touched, that was pretty uncomfortable.
Ribs were my most painful one for sure. And I'm thinking about getting another one there, but I'm trying to remind myself of how bad it was, because it's easy to forget, but man, I was sweating and like even a little bit sick for hours after that tattoo was over. So that one was pretty tough.
Yeah, that was my first ever one, was on my ribs. And the guy was like, are you sure you want to do this? And I was like, yeah. And I mean, I just turned 18. Like my dad came to sit in the tattoo shop and watch, because he's like, I want to see you sit through this.
Yeah.
And so then I sat there, and I mean, I remembered like trying to prove a point of like, I was not going to move. And I was like, I'm going to win this bet of just let the guy do his thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then I've done the same thing where I'm like, maybe I'll get my other side done. And I'm like, man, that was really uncomfortable. Maybe I won't do that. I'm like, it's a long time to sit there too, if you're getting something really detailed and pretty big. But other than that, I don't know if I will. We'll see.
Man, that's impressive that you went back with that being your first one. If that was my first one, I don't know if I would have gotten any more tattoos. But man, I could sit here and talk about tattoos all day. But another thing that I saw that I couldn't confirm is that you were in a former life a motocross pro. Is there any truth to that?
So I didn't race professionally. So I grew up racing. I started when I was about 10. One of my buddies, like we always had like a little PW50 in our house growing up. And I mean, I didn't really take anything else to it besides the first time I ever got on it. I remember I was like a little kid, and my mom was driving. I grabbed the throttle by accident. We took out a mailbox and wrecked. And I mean, that was like, I was little. And then fast forward like 7 or 8 years. And then one of my buddies from elementary school had one, and I hopped on like a little YZ85, probably not the brightest idea, like now knowing history of bikes. So that is a 2-stroke. And so if you know anything about motocross, like a 2-stroke has a power band. And for someone learning how to ride, it's not the best bike to put them on. But I tried, and then I launched it into a tree, and I was like, man, this is awesome. And I love it. And so then I fell in love with racing, got into it, started riding, had to get up enough money. My dad was like, well, I used to jump around from like sport to sport. I just couldn't figure out like what I really wanted to do. And he's like, well, you need to show me this is what you want to focus on. So I had to pay for like half the bike. So I ended up like cutting yards, doing pressure washing, cleaning people's houses, like anything I could to get money to start. And then that kind of turned into that. Raced for about 10 years. And then one of my best friends at the time was going professional. And so I pretty much stopped racing, and then kind of I enjoyed working on bikes, taking them apart, figuring out what was wrong, how to fix it, and then kind of started working with him full time. And then we kind of traveled the US more or less in a RV. I pretty much drove a 40-foot RV. We had multiple bikes. So we'd have our practice bikes, race bikes, and then we'd just go to all the practice tracks and then go and race on the weekends. And his parents just let us go.
Nice.
And I mean, he was 16 and I was 18 at the time.
Wow.
And
Where'd you grow up, Travis?
in Georgia. Yeah. So then we pretty much just went all over, and it was definitely a interesting experience, but I loved every minute of it. And then kind of got out of that and found out I was better at fitness. And so I went that route.
Wait, so you went right from motocross right into CrossFit?
Yeah. So growing up, like we always had to work out, because it was like, if you hit the ground at 50 miles an hour, like it's going to hurt. So my dad was like, you need to be in somewhat shape. So I used to get up before school at like 5 o'clock, and I would go run. Then I would go to school. Then we'd have a strength training class. And then when I got home in the afternoon, we would ride, or I would work out again. And so I just kind of created this love for fitness, but not really thinking of it as that, because I thought it was benefiting me in motocross and that side of things. And then as I started to get out of that, I was like, well, this is actually really fun. Like, and it's making me healthy. And then I get to also like teach people. So then I got into like personal training. And so when I started personal training, I was still being a mechanic in South Georgia for my buddy. And then it just kind of led to a point where I was like, I think I want to spend more of my time training and focusing on that. And so then we kind of split paths. He still went professional and raced for a few years. And then I went and now kind of found CrossFit throughout that. And I guess the rest is kind of history from there.
Did you know kind of early on in your fitness, your CrossFit career that, hey, this is something I could be really freaking good at? And was there like a workout that's kind of clicked for you? It was like, either this sucks and I enjoy it, or actually I can be pretty good at this thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think when I got into it it was still pretty early on. So like back then I remember watching like the Again Faster and Rogue videos where they used to go like head to head with people. And then it was like, they were still at the ranch, or I guess they had the first year at Carson. And so I kind of like watched a lot of those videos, and I was like, I mean, I think I could do this. So I went out and did Fran, right then, because I was like at my buddy's PT office, and we'd use like, I thought RX was 115 and strict pull-ups. So I did Fran with 115 and strict pull-ups.
Ouch.
And I was like, man, this is awesome. I love it. And it was the same kind of like feeling as motocross. Like, oh, I got hurt. This is awesome. I'm over here, like I'm throwing up in the bathroom. These people were like, what's wrong with this kid? And then I just kind of like created this love already for it. And from that moment, I pretty much changed everything from the way I was eating, getting coaches, everything around. I wanted to be a CrossFit Games athlete and strive for that. So then that immediately I switched everything I was doing, the way I was eating, sleeping, recovery, and pretty much just solely focused on being a professional athlete or striving to be at that point. And so then in 2013 was like, in 2011, I missed regionals by one spot. So I took 61st and they took top 60 back then. And so I went on a team, and like the gym I was at was a bunch of older folks. So it was like, I was 20 years younger than all of them at that point. They were like 45 and 50 years old, but at regionals back then, it was like, that was normal and okay. And then in 2012, I fractured my L5. And then 2013 was the first year I made it officially to like the games.
Wow. So you fractured your L5 in 2012 and were able to come back the next season and make regionals for the first time?
Yep.
How did that happen?
Oh,
interesting that it wasn't motocross. It's interesting.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It wasn't. So it was at my brother's wedding. So it was like the initial
party tricks.
Yeah, that failed. So I jumped from my back to my feet, and my foot slipped on the hardwood, and I like landed straight on my back, and immediately was like, man, that hurt. And I was like, I've hit the ground a lot, and that really felt uncomfortable. But whatever, you just keep going, keep enjoying the night. It's a good night. My brother's getting married. It was fun. And then I was leaving with now my wife, and I was like, man, that really hurt. Like, that was uncomfortable. And so then a couple of days later, I went and lifted with my Olympic coach, and we were snatching, and I like stepped off the platform and just kind of like collapsed. And I was like, yeah, something's wrong. Like, I need to go get this looked at. And then ended up having an MRI and everything. And they're like, yeah, it's fractured. And so then I pretty much just got a cortisone shot and did absolutely nothing for a long period of time. I had members that were demoing movements and classes, and just let them, like, I didn't even demo air squats. Like, I was very cautious with how I did everything, just so it could heal faster and I could get back to working out and trying to achieve that goal of being at the game. So yeah, then after, I don't even remember how long of not doing a single thing, I started to ease back into it, and then just spent a lot of time on the midline stuff and kind of the gymnastics bodies progressions and all of that. And then from there, it led us to being healthy.
I find that to be the same with me. Like, you know, we all do such crazy things in our own little fitness worlds. And then the thing that like throws my back out is me brushing my teeth or like picking my 1-year-old up off the ground. It's like, how is that possible? It's always like this absurd, like weird thing. No, not doing a handstand for half an hour, lifting, well, not absurd amount of weights for me, but it's always something absurd and something crazy that always does it. But glad you healed up, man.
That, like, my members will be the same way. I'll be like, man, I hurt myself. And I'm like, oh, what'd you do? Like, thinking something inside the gym, like, what happened? Like, nah, I went and tripped over this rock outside and didn't, like, broke my toe and something. I'm like, oh man. Or I went to basketball. Yeah, it's always something else where I'm like, I'm pretty sure CrossFit's not very dangerous relative to what everybody else is doing outside of the gym. And when they're intoxicated, that's a different story.
True. Well, man, getting to know you, you're very energetic and upbeat, and I'm curious as to how that's possible with having 4 kids, because I have a hard time keeping up with one. I only have one, and I mean, I'm not doing very well.
No, that's just naturally my personality. Kind of ever since I've been young, I've always just kind of been full of energy, and now I see it in my kids, and they all are full of it, and I'm like, man, you guys just need to calm down. But my wife's like, they get this from you. Like, my wife is very level-headed, very calm, just sits back, takes everything in, and I'm just the complete opposite of that. And I can see it in each of my kids, and I'm like, oh no, like they're up at 5:15 every day. They're ready to go. Like, you'll hear them open up the gate. They'll come bang on the door or open up the door. Dad. I'm like, okay.
What are the ages?
So my oldest will turn 6 next week. My 4-year-old's birthday is tomorrow. My 2-year-old's birthday was almost a month ago. And then I have a 7-month-old.
Wow. So you got 3 boys and then the fourth is a girl.
6'4", 2, and 7 months. Yeah, 3 boys and 1 girl.
Unbelievable, man. More power to you.
Yeah, purposefully like 2 years apart. Was that intended to be that way?
Yeah, originally when we kind of talked about like having kids, I was like, yeah, I think 2. 2's a great number. Then we had 1. Then we had our second one. I was like, man, this is really fun. Like, I enjoy this. Like, she's like, do you want 3? I was like, sure, let's do it. And then after the third one, she was like, I don't feel like we're fully complete. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, am I done?
Dog? No.
And she's like, want another one? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so then, then we found out. So with COVID, when we were finding out all of this, like I couldn't go to any of the appointments. And so it was just kind of like a weird feeling. Thankfully, this was our 4th one. And so I've been able to experience what that's all like. But for people that didn't, like we had some gym members, like their first kid was like during this and the husband couldn't go to any of the ultrasounds. Like, man, that's a bummer because like that's such a cool thing to experience. But then when finding out the gender, they put it on like a sticky note and then double-sided it something. So when we opened it up out of the envelope, she was like, do you want to find out? And I was like, yeah. So we went to open it and it was like, oh, what's it going to be? And then we flip it over and then it's double sticky side again. So then you're still waiting and you're like, and then when we found out it was girl, it's pretty exciting. But yeah, we weren't ever really anticipating if it was boy, girl, whatever. I think it's just kind of been healthy baby is kind of the most important thing. And it's been, I mean, it's definitely wild at my house 99% of the time and chaotic, but I mean, I love every minute of it. And I think it also puts a lot of other things in life in perspective and makes you appreciate the little things and not so stressed about the things that are happening in the gym or like other places where when you go home and then your kid goes, Dad, and runs to you, like that stuff kind of takes all of the other stress and things you have going on in your life away. And I mean, it's a blessing, you know, having all of them. A wife that allows me to work out and still be a dad.
Right.
That's it's super interesting. It's actually something I feel like maybe Chad, we brought up a little bit with Scott Panchik when we had him on a couple of weeks ago, because you know Scott's also a recent dad for the first time dad, and you know you've had essentially half of your CrossFit career as without children. Now you've had the last 6+ years with children. We talked about, you know, whether or not that was a challenge with Scott, and he seemed to think that, you know, having the kid around gave him more perspective, gave him the ability to kind of balance things out a little bit more, and actually made him a better competitor. I'm curious how you view the first portion of your CrossFit career prior to children and then now. And, you know, normally you think 4 kids makes everything a little bit more of a challenge, but have you seen benefits to your training as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see both sides to that, right? Like there's definitely the pluses if you don't have kids, like you can sleep in more and like you have not that stress of those kind of things, but you can also look at it as it's a motivator. It's another reason to push yourself in workouts. Like there's a bigger why happening than just, it's just for me now, like being able when they're older to tell them like the stories of like how I became a games athlete, the adversity I faced, the different things that go on in life, and to be able to share those experiences with them, I think is a big plus. And I mean, I wouldn't change having kids for anything. And I think it definitely does add a lot of motivation that if you don't have a child, it's hard to describe, like bringing a child into the world and seeing a baby for the first time. Like the first ever baby I really held was my own. And so like when you have that experience, it's a hard thing to describe. And since like both of you guys are dads, you understand that. But for people that don't, they're just like, oh yeah, you got kids, like that's cool. But it means a lot more than like once you have your own, that is yours, that you brought into this world. And I think on Scott's point, it definitely does give you like that extra motivation. It gives you an extra drive. And it just makes things not seem as pressured and stressed as much, because it's like, there's better things to look forward to when you get home and sports and as they grow up and those kind of different things that you get to spend time with them. I mean, I love hanging out with my kids and doing things with them. So it's not like I don't like spending time with my kids and I want to be gone all the time. So I might be different and enjoy that stuff. And maybe that's why I have 4. But
they got some athletic ability themselves. You see it kind of peeking out there at that age.
Yeah, so my oldest one seems to be like my wife, like just kind of like the super genius, like very smart, intelligent with how he does things. My other two are very athletic, like you can just see how they're handling, how they fall, how they hop up, like kicking the ball with two different feet at 3. Like my at just turning 3, my other one was riding motorcycles, and so
Wow.
Nice.
we put them on bikes very early. Like we did gymnastics early, so like those little fundamental things of like, I look at it as like, okay, I did these things like now as a professional athlete, and I see the benefit of like, okay, gymnastics plays a major role in this. Like, hey, you guys should learn the structures of this, but like, here's the fun game aspect of it. And then also giving them the other side of like things I love to do, which was riding motocross. So like they have electric bikes and real dirt bikes, and just letting them kind of experience with everything and whatever they want to kind of stick with and do. And then we'll kind of see what happens as they grow up. But I'm definitely not pushing them to do anything they don't want to do. If right now they're about to start lacrosse and soccer, and so it's just like, let them go and have fun and find the joy in whatever it is they want to pursue.
Chad, you hear that? Foundation of gymnastics. Just want to make sure
It
very
went
clear.
in one ear and out the other. I mean, I appreciate you trying to remind me, but yeah, I tried to ignore that. But no, I agree there with you, Travis. I think for me, I'm my daughter's
No, I'm kidding.
playmate. So
No, I'm just
what's
kidding.
that? No,
What'd you
I
say?
think you're not a fan of gymnastics.
no, I hate it. No, but for me, it's I'm my daughter's playmate, and it's like I get to be a kid again,
Yeah.
you know, or continue being a kid. So
She's teaching you stuff, man, right? She's teaching
Oh,
you how
yeah.
to skateboard. She's teaching you
Oh
all this
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. I would have if it wasn't for her, I would have never gotten on a skateboard or anything like that. We just got she's a tomboy, so she just got a remote control car for her birthday, and I grew up playing with a remote control car, so I get to play with that again. So it's awesome. But I'm curious because I have a girl, Dave has 2 girls, you had 3 boys and then a girl, and I know she's only 7 months old, but have you been able to tell any difference in having a girl versus having a boy so far?
Yeah, she'll never date.
There you go. Done.
She got quite a protection.
Yeah, she's got 3 older brothers to protect her and never date. I mean, I think the initial part, no, like it still feels very similar to the way like my boys were. Like, I mean, you love this thing unconditionally. Like, this is something you created, and I think the love that I have for my boys, I have for my daughter. I think it's more of a protection role, almost like you feel, and partially like, man, when she gets older, like, no, I don't want you to take and do these things, because I'm like, I remember how I was as a boy, and the things I did. I'm like, no, and I'm like, the times now are so much worse than they were back when I was younger. So from that side of things, it's like a slight terrified. And my wife's like, well, it can go both ways. I'm like, yeah, can it? I mean, it's just more in my head, just knowing those things. But I think overall, I mean, my second one like loves her, like always wants to be with her, loves playing with her. My oldest, he's just kind of like, whatever, like it's another baby, like we've got a lot of these now. So the younger 2 brothers definitely interact with her more, and kind of, I think, will have that protection role over her to a degree. But I mean, I think it's definitely a different feeling, and it's hard to kind of describe what that's like between them. But there definitely is differences from like the boy to the girl, where you're almost just wanting to, like, that's your little girl, you know, like you want to protect her, always watch out for her. And the boys, I'm like, all right, you fall, you get up, like you're okay, like let's keep going. And I think you can see that on both sides. But I'll be interested to see what happens in like the next few years as she starts to get older and kind of like into those phases that they are now. But right now she's still just kind of crawling around, and that's what she did pull up for the first time the other day on the bathroom. So that's a little terrifying that she's going to want to start walking in no time.
Yeah, there you go. Well, make sure you give her a PVC to do some snatching and clean and jerking with before too long. She'll be ready. But I mean, it sounds like to me your wife would have kept saying, hey, you want another one, until y'all had a girl. Is a girl something that she was looking for?
You know, I think on our second one we were like, maybe it'll be a girl, and then for some weird reason, and she was like, I just have this feeling it's a girl. And they're like, well, it's a boy. And I was like, all right, well, we're wrong and can't trust your feelings. But no, we really never planned. It wasn't like we were going to keep trying and end up having 12 kids until we got a girl. that that definitely wasn't going to happen. It was more so just, I think we wanted 4, and if it was all boys, I think that would have been a lot of fun as well. And if it was a girl, then she had 3 older brothers. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't like we were planning to have a girl at any given point, and I definitely was not going to keep trying until we got to that point, because that gets expensive.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine for sure.
Well,
Yep.
go ahead,
Dave.
Chad. I want to say I
Yeah.
wanted to ask a little bit about your training.
Yeah.
You know, you're down in Georgia. You're training with Training Think Tank, and I just wanted to get some perspective. You know, we've had some different discussions with athletes over the past year or so, getting their thoughts on training either as an individual or with groups, kind of these super teams being created around the country. And I'm curious to get your thoughts, kind of what your training situation actually looks like. You know, you're training with Max. You know, there's some other athletes under this umbrella of Training Think Tank. I believe they're down in Georgia as well, but I don't know how often you see Max. Is it a daily basis kind of interaction with your coach and other athletes? Can you give us a little rundown of what it's normally like for you to train within this group of collection of other experts and coaches and athletes?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I own the whole facility. So like my gym is inside, or TTT's inside my gym. So I own like a 12,000 square foot gym. And so originally part of our gym, the way it's kind of like shaped like an L. So you would walk in and then it's like all just CrossFit stuff. And then it like kind of veers off to the right and it's a big L. And when I got married, Max came down for my wedding and we pitched him the idea of like, hey, would you want to move your business down here? And so like you can rent out this kind of space. I'll give you all the offices. We have like 7 offices and different stuff. And he was like, nah, I don't know. Cause at that point in time, he was in Colorado. And the next morning he's like, hey, can you take me to go look at this house? And so then I ended up taking him to go look at this house. He liked the house. And then fast forward to now all of his coaches are here on site. They have like a on-site program, but most of the people are remote or do remote programming that are here on site and train as well. And so everything within TTT is happening inside the hub of my own gym, which is kind of cool. So then my members get to see things that happen. And when Noah and Chandler and other people that have come and visit, and Sarah, like people get excited because they're like, oh, there's these high level people that you don't get to see kind of on your everyday basis, is happening every day, usually here. So from a training side of things, originally when it started was mainly just kind of like me and Max. And then as the whole team has started to grow, so Mike McGoldrick, when he was still kind of competitive, now he's old and washed up. I'm just kidding. He's not. So him and his wife are here, and his wife's like my GM of the gym. And so then Mike works for Max. So it's kind of like everybody's just come together in kind of full circle, which is cool. But then from like the training perspective, so for the last year or 6 months, probably leading into the games, it was Noah, Lauren Fisher, myself, Alexis Raptis, Cedric Lapointe, Bryn, Cal, man, there was a list. Kyle Bernier, like there was probably 12 of us, that Alessandra Pichelli, all of us were training daily together in prep for the semifinals and games.
How long in advance was that, where you guys were all together?
I mean, it was a while. Maybe right after the open or during the open. Like it was a while. Wow. Like Noah had a apartment right down the street. So I mean, like everybody, Sandra moved here, that her and her husband had a house. So I mean, it was very, everybody was on site for a long time. So pretty much from that point, we had every session together, and then you would have accessory work and skill work development or whatever it is that you needed extra outside of that for like your 3rd or 4th session, whatever it was. But it would be like in the morning, we would usually go to the track or do some sort of cyclical piece. And then you'd come in, then you'd have your strength and CrossFit piece. And then after that, you'd have something else, and then potentially something else here and there. But that's kind of how it worked leading up all the way to the games and through the games with myself, Noah, and Sandra. And then pretty much now that the games has calmed down, everybody's kind of moved back to where they live. So Noah's back in Miami, Sandra's in Canada. Lauren's back in California, so everybody's just kind of back all over the place. And then usually coming back into like competition season, everybody will kind of start to rotate towards almost the same thing again. Of I think Noah might stay down in Miami and then just travel up here and there instead of staying up here full time and being away from like his fiance and stuff, and then go back and forth every so often. And then same with, I don't know what Sandra's doing. I think she might be taken off, and that was her last year, so I'm not really sure, but that's kind of how it goes. And then we have people on site that I train with. But right now it's slowly just kind of like the accessory work, the not exciting stuff that people enjoy doing is kind of like the phase I'm in right now. Of now leading into Rogue is things are starting to pick up, but the majority of things the last few weeks have been single leg development work, knee rehab stuff, like issues I kind of had going on before the games that you just kind of push aside and keep training hard. And then when you're done, can spend some quality time focusing on those things. A lot of midline stuff, pegboard, figuring out how to do handstands apparently with the controlled standard. So those kind of things that you just practice more without worrying too much about CrossFit.
Sure.
And I think everybody always tries to think like that's all we do is just CrossFit, where I definitely don't. And I never have. Like you have to have those, I always call them on ramp. Like you have to have those times of like backing off. If it's relearning how to snatch, relearning how to snatch. If it's relearning how to be upside down, like all of those skills that you need to learn, like you have to do them in a controlled environment. And I think it's not always about the intensity. Like, yes, it is to a degree when you're like competing, but then you also have to stay healthy. And I mean, I've been in the games for a long time and thankfully have not had any really injuries since my back issue, which was my own fault of dancing. But from that side of things, it's like taking the time off, being smart, listening to my body. If I feel something, I just take the day off and don't even try to push it. Cause I'm like, in the grand scheme of things, it's not important, right? Like if it's like, I got a little elbow thing, like, all right, just take the day off, get some PT work on it, then come back tomorrow and you'll probably be fine. It's the people that then keep going for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, like, yeah, man, this has really been bothering me. Oh, how long has it been going on? 3 weeks. Like, okay, so now you're gonna have to have a lot more time off than if you just took like the 1 or 2 days. Then so it's just being able to stay healthy right now and continue the prep going into Rogue and see where that leads us. And I guess we're like 45 days some way.
Yeah, it's going to be here in no time, but that's such an important thing to preach, right? And I think this idea of the prep work, the accessory pieces, the foundational components, and not just always showcasing the intensity side of the sport. And I think, it's the sexy part. It's the part that everyone wants to see. Everyone wants to see the end result. But from an athlete, from your perspective, and for you being able to help guide people in your own gym or people that follow you, to be able to say, hey, you know what? As an athlete, the majority of what I'm doing is actually preparing for those other things by slowing down and working on better movement patterns, making sure that my body's healthy so that I can actually do those intense workouts when needed. I think sometimes people just see the end result, and Chad, we talk about this endlessly, but they just see the end result and they think that that's what games athletes are doing day in and day out all day. And it's a little bit of a false narrative, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I showed you my snatch from when I first started to what it looks like now, you'd be like, who is this guy? I've retrained my snatch 10 different times because I've worked on the mobility and position. So my bottom position changes. So then I have to change the way I'm holding onto the bar. Then I change it. Like, it's an endless process. And I think that's what's also exciting about the sport is that you're always constantly learning and developing. And even the thing with the handstands, like it was kind of frustrating in the moment, but like now you look back and if Dave was, which he most likely will put it out again, then you'll see the progress and development and how it kind of slowly keeps pushing the sport to advanced levels of different things. And I think that's what's exciting about the sport, but you also have to realize it's not an overnight thing. Like this is years and years that I spent doing 3 to 4 hours of mobility a night just to get my bottom position better and my ankles opened up and my hips and figure out how to get the bar actually stacked overhead in a better position. Like that stuff takes time, but no one wants to see that, right? No one wants to do that. No one wants to be off in the corner of the gym by themselves doing movement work, where that's the stuff that's like, well, when you get hurt, you're going to be doing the movement work because that's what's wrong. So it's like, why not add it in as accessory work, prevent those things from actually happening, and now you're healthy and can keep going for a longer period of time. Like, you don't want to show up and be in the game for 1 year, have a great year, and then be done. I mean, at least for me, like, I wanted to continue the journey and the process. And I mean, this is my 7th year at the game. So like, I've continued that journey for a long time. So I want to keep doing that. But I also have to realize I have to be smart about how I'm training and doing things. And now that I am getting older, I have to warm up longer. I have to cool down longer. I need to make sure I'm spending those time doing those things, where you have like Mal O'Brien, where she's like 17, just does 12 workouts in a day and can keep going. And I'm like, man, that's so impressive. But you just still also have to look at the things of like taking the time. Like, you'll eventually get to the point where you can't keep doing that. Like, at some point it breaks down for everybody. It will happen, but it's just at when that point is, you just got to be smart with it.
Can I ask you really quickly just about what you brought up, the handstand workout from the games? I'm curious to get your thoughts. I heard you talk about it a little bit on some other podcasts, things like that. First time that freestanding handstand push-ups were introduced. I'm curious to get your take on, one, when the announcement was made, and then also how you felt doing a movement that from,
I mean, it was probably it brought out an anger side during the middle of that. I mean, the first initial reaction was like, all right, that's cool. Like, it'll be something different. But then when we got in the back and it was briefed, and when you leave a standard that subjective to a judge, it's very hard. And you can even see the judges are like, oh no, like it's very hard. Like, I feel like there was a much easier way to do the standard, where it's just like, you handstand walk, do a push-up, walk to the next line. Like, to make, like, that would have been much easier. Like, the hands touch the line, you can come down. Now, would it have been as graceful? Probably not. People would have probably jumped and found a way around it. And I get that. But when you're introducing a new movement to the judges at that point in time that had no clue, then to the athletes, it's a very difficult thing to try to nail on the spot for everybody. And then you're going to have some judges like, that's subjective, and I thought that was controlled. And you have this guy who was like, no, it wasn't controlled enough. Like, for my judge, I weren't controlled enough at all. And it just seemed to happen frequently. And I mean, it was, at first it was kind of, I don't want to say funny, but it was almost like funny, like, all right, whatever, like, it just is what it is. I don't know what else you want me to do at this point, where like, I don't know how much longer I can control and hold like the same thing I just did for that rep you gave me, but the last one you didn't. And then then it gets frustrating. And then I got distracted and then was more irritated with that whole thing. So I think in the moment was definitely frustrated, but I think now people will start to train it. They'll train it that way. And then when it comes out again, it'll be a much easier transition for kind of everybody, because everybody knows the standard.
Right. But it's an interesting conversation, because it's more around this idea of creating uniformity around the judging standard, right? And exposing judges to movements that they're going to be expected to judge, equally across the board, potentially prior to the actual announcement of the workout. Do you think it's beneficial at all for the judges to have experience or some knowledge prior to, like, say Dave pulled the judges aside a week before and said, hey, this is a potential movement. This is what we're looking for. Can we all get on the same page as to what we're looking for, test it out? Doesn't seem like those kind of things are being done right now. And it's creating, and it's not just this workout. It's happened in the past before with ring handstand push-ups and some of the handstand push-up standards that we've seen change 10 times over the years. So I'm curious, as an athlete, what you would like to see done with kind of judging standards.
I mean, I think you do that, or you then say, here's a list of movements, right, that are happening at the games. You don't have to say how it's happening. You don't have to say the format. You don't have to say anything. Here's the movements for the judges, whatever. And then at least they have an understanding. They can see what they're wanting. Like, the fact you're briefing the judge and the athletes on like, okay, it was hand, then controlled, head down. And it was like, and then they did another rep and the judge was like, good. And then Boz is like, no. And it's like, okay, so clearly there's a discrepancy from the head judge and then the other judges. Like, what is it that's happening? So I think, to your point, having Dave or Boz, somebody send out a list of like, hey, these are the movements that are going to be coming up at the games. This is the new movement we're introducing. This is the standard we're wanting. And then they're already on the same page as like, okay, this is what we're looking for. Or you then send it out also out to the athletes, at least of like a strange movement like that. Like, you know how ridiculous we probably all looked on CBS, like relative to like, if you gave us a week, right? Even if it was like a week before, like a hint, it doesn't even have to be how it is, but like, here's a movement, and then they do it. And then at least the athletes would practice that, and you can practice that movement 30 times a day. Like, it's not going to fatigue you. It's just practicing the skill. So then when you get into that scenario, now everybody doesn't look ridiculous and flopping all over themselves, rolling out, flailing their hands and body. And then it's like, no wonder these CrossFit people are strange. Like, look at this. But I think you could kind of do it both ways like that. I mean, I get trying to keep things, the unknown, the unknowable, but it's like, okay, well, it's going to come out. People are all going to see it. And you're trying to make it like a global sport, and you want everybody to see it on TV. I mean, like, you might have well picked like clean and jerks and pegboard or something else versus watching everybody do 4 deadlifts and then sit there on their head and just fall all over the place.
I'm sure it's so challenging and frustrating for the judges too, being like, you know, we're figuring this out as we go along too, not knowing exactly what to look for. So it's challenging on all ends of the spectrum there.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've definitely developed over the years for sure in a much better way. And I think each year, like, it continues to progress. And I mean, you have to have those things that happen to realize like, okay, maybe that wasn't the best idea. Like cutting back in 2018 to top 10 off of the sprint, probably not the best idea. And then you only have 10 people that finished out, and you only had like 2 people that actually lifting the bar, and you couldn't separate anything. Like, it was they realized that was probably not the best idea. And the way they did it this year was a lot better. Like, hey, you guys get to compete through 10 events or 9 events. Then we're going to make a cut. Then we're going to make one more cut, which I think was a fair workout to cut on. There was a lot of separation. There was a skill, like those things that go into play versus like, hey, this is down to a sprint, and now we're going to cut 30 athletes. And it's like, well, that's kind of interesting, because that's definitely going to change the top 10. Not that I'm bitter for getting out on 1/1000 second or anything, but I mean, it's just, I think they learn as they go, and that's part of the sport. Is like, it's not like basketball where there's set rules and this is like, that's it. It's not like really the rules of basketball are changing too much, but the rules of CrossFit, the standards, the box jumps, the burpee, like every movement every year in the open and something, it changes. And so I think that's also what's hard, is like what you were just saying with the handstand. Like, the handstand push-up has changed 17 different times in the open of a standard to figure out how they want to do it. Oh, well, my forearm length is different than your forearm. And it's like, what? Just like make a standard and that's it. Like, it doesn't have to be super crazy. And then it's just easier, and everybody can train that the whole time, but it changes all the time. And I think that's what's challenging with the sport and teaching the judges, is because it's constantly changing.
Right.
So, but I think over time it will just get better.
Yeah, it definitely will. You know, Chad, this is one of the things that we preach endlessly too, is this idea of training towards technique and allowing technique to be your preparation for any standard that might be thrown at you, as opposed to training to the standard that you see today and expecting it to stay that same way moving forward, because those things are always constantly changing. So if you have a technical understanding, you can apply that to whatever's thrown at you. But I'm curious just to go back.
I don't know how you guys do that stuff. I mean, like, I watched the Olympics, so like deduction for this, deduction for this, deduction for this. And I'm like,
for everything. Yeah.
I don't even know what it looked great. Look great. Yeah. Don't even know what you did, but look great. I'd give you
thumbs up from this guy.
Yeah, that's right. Like, oh, a 17 deduction. His shirt moved to the right.
Yeah.
That's the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of judging, because the judging in gymnastics is so complicated that, one, the fans have no idea what's going on. And it's so complicated that a lot of times the coaches and athletes don't even know what's going on. They change the rules, you know, every quad after the Olympics, kind of rearranging things, but also even during the quad, they'll make changes. But it's so convoluted and so challenging to really get a grasp of that. It's hard for people to want to get interested, you know, and we want people to be able to understand if they didn't grow up with the sport, and they make it so challenging that it kind of defeats the purpose. So it's one of the things I think
it's cool to watch, but man, it's cool to watch. I'm like, man, they're flipping and spinning, and only people really knew how hard that stuff is. I mean, I've
That's
done
the thing.
like
we need more
body
forms of comparison.
progressions, and I've done like trying to do like forward leans and I'm like planche, and I'm like, what in the world? I'm like, I'm gonna break my forearms trying half of this stuff. And
How tall are you?
5'11".
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not really built to be a gymnast.
I say you're trying planches and things like that. That's super impressive. You could ever pull those things off, you'd probably be in Guinness Book.
Yeah, well.
But I want to go back to a question about your.
I had a bet with my coach that I gave him 3 years to learn a mana.
Oh my God, that's not enough time.
but I will admit, so he's 240 pounds, but the things he was
not enough time.
do was so impressive. Like, he would be able to pull himself up, but there was no way he was going to get himself over. That's just why I took the bet. But if I sent you some of the stuff, you'd be like, no way, like how strong he actually is in weird positions for like a bigger guy. It's so impressive.
That's amazing. So
snatch 310 and clean and jerk massive amounts, but it's just like, he's very smart with like how he does everything, but that's funny.
It's super impressive. I'd love to see kind of what he got to, but for those out there listening, a mana is kind of the evolution from an L-sit. So L-sit would be with the legs out horizontal. The next would be, what's that?
Except 10 times harder.
10 times, at least 10 times. The next would be a V with the legs kind of vertical. And then the mana is turning over even further. And now your legs are horizontal to the ground while over your head. It's an incredibly difficult movement. In fact, there's probably only a handful of guys in the world that can really do it well. Gymnasts, I'm talking about high-level gymnasts.
We're not
only a handful. So yeah, that's a bet that I definitely would have taken if I was on your end of it.
Yeah, it was me and Sarah. It was like me, Sigmund's daughter, and I feel like someone else. We're like, yeah, there's no way you're gonna get this. But every day he tried. Like,
I love it.
Got into like some very good positions, and I was like, at one point, I was like, man, he's actually like getting pretty good at this stuff, and I was like, nah, there's still no way. And then I would watch videos of people doing it, and I was like, nah, you can't do that.
But he actually has the mobility for it though.
His mobility is pretty impressive. Yeah. Like when he gets into positions, and even like he gets into better positions than I will, like on ring supports and different things, like of how much strength and like his tendons and different things he has. So like I wouldn't put it past him, but then I knew it was just too hard. I was like, there's no way. But that's impressive. When I first started with him, or not when I first started with him, but a few years after, like he would build up to my snatch in like 4 attempts.
Nice.
He's super strong, and then would be able to do splits and then all these handstand stuff. It's weird, and he's 240.
Sounds like he could be quite the CrossFitter if he wanted to beat himself.
He's too big.
Yeah.
All right. Just speaking of him a little bit, you guys sound like you have a great relationship. Is this the fact that he's there in the gym with you? You know, have training think tank in your gym. Is it an advantage for you to be able to have the coach there? Basically, you said all the other athletes that are kind of within this training group come in remotely, right? They come in, they train with you guys, and they head out. But it's basically you and Max that are there full time. Is that an advantage? Do you find it to be an advantage that you get to have one-on-one time with him on a regular basis? I'm kind of curious how that athlete-coach relationship is for you guys.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I mean, it kind of developed early on of like, my role with him was the remote kind of same way as all his other clients. Like it was just like, I lived in Georgia, he was in Colorado at that point in time. And then we started getting more in person, and ultimately being in person, having someone eyes on you the entire time is going to be better it doesn't matter who you are. Like having your coach in person is going to help. They can see things that you're probably not doing, or then hold you to a different standard. And so it's almost over the years, once he's been here, has just like created a better structure, a better environment, holding me to a higher standard. Like even if he's training and doing his own thing while I'm doing mine, like he can peek over and still see what I'm doing, and watching and be like, all right, here, alter this, let's try to work on this position. Or then when we're doing movement work, like he can then get his hands on me and like actually put me into the position that he wants. And so then that helps with writing the programs. And then it ultimately just leads to success more at the end than it does being remote. Now, there's nothing wrong with being remote, and I think there are benefits to that as well. But having someone on site, being able to physically watch you and see what you're doing, is beneficial. And I mean, I think him being here, all his coaches being here, like someone in the gym when I'm training, like at least one of his coaches or something is watching me do something. So then they can tell him or whatever it is. And then we have other people that interns that are helping and watching and judging. And so then you're just creating a higher standard inside the gym of like what you're wanting and then what you're training towards. And we've created kind of like, he's honestly like a big brother to me from how we've kind of gotten to this role now. So you have like the coach and friendship role, and then definitely areas at times where you're like, no, you can't say that. Like, you're my coach at times. And then on the other side, it's like, all right, when we're out of the gym, you can go say those things and we can joke and pick on each other. But it's definitely a balancing act. But I would say if you can be in person with your coach, it's going to be better for you regardless. But if you can't, having someone remote to at least watch, send videos and do that can only help.
Absolutely. So your finishes at the games has been fairly consistent. Would you say kind of this 10 to 12 range for the past few seasons? What do you think is kind of holding you back from getting to that next step of being able to podium? I'm sure that's a goal for yourself to end up on top of the podium. What do you think is kind of holding you back from being able to make that next jump?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think for me, if I'm looking back, it's just it's not the physical stuff, it's what's happening between the ears. And so that's something I work a lot on and have in the last year. I've started working with a mental performance coach last year, and I've started to see a lot of progress and things. And then when I got to the games, the whole first day, I didn't do the same routine of things that I did every single day leading up to that point. So there's certain things that we do and we talk about when I go into training, and then how I reframe and how I set an intention and all these different things that when the chaos of the games happened on that day one, I just kind of like forgot it and didn't do those things. And that then kind of put me back into like an old mindset of like certain things that I was doing were brought back in. And then I was thinking about those things and becoming outcome focused. And I wasn't outcome focused at all leading up to that. So it was like, why am I relying on that now? And it just kind of distracted me. And so that night when I called her, we started discussing all of it. And it was like, oh yeah, I didn't do this. I didn't do this. I didn't do this. I didn't do this. And so that first day, it just definitely took some workouts where I didn't feel kind of like myself and what I've been focusing on and really trying. And I think if I can continue to develop myself as an athlete and that full belief system in myself, then I think I can push through that like kind of 10th to 12th place finish and just have a better finish overall. And I mean, I think that's part of the sport, is it's constantly evolving, and it's not like the workouts are always perfect for everybody. And there's going to be things that come up that just aren't your way. And sometimes you're going to have judges errors and things that happen, but you can't allow that to distract you and take your focus away from the end goal. And I think on the first day it was a little frustrating. And then I kind of found my rhythm the second day. Then the third day, like I had a couple hiccups with some judges and stuff. And so like those little things, even though it's not a lot, those little things just start to add up. And then you look back and the points really isn't that much. And it was like, okay, I was, I think 2/10 off on the run and it was 8 spots.
Right.
And you're like, okay, 8 spots is 40 points. Okay. You add that 40. And then so I could nitpick and start to break down every single workout and explain it. But it's those little things of like, when you're in training, you have to dig in harder and you have to find a way to get that little bit better, because that's going to get you so much closer to what you want to be at. And it was like, if I had 40 points, that would have put me up 3 places. And it was like, okay, that's just from one event. And then you start, okay, well, out of 15 events, this is what happened. But I mean, it could have been worse. I could have been cut. I could have not made it through the whole weekend. And I felt like I got some redemption from the being cut by the 1/1000th of a second and 18 to then that point to continue. But I think it's, for me, it's what's happening more so between the ears and my self dialogue than it is physically with my body, as I say. So I think it's definitely a work in progress, and it's hard. And it has its ups and downs, and it's definitely frustrating at times because you work so hard to get to that point and you want to execute on the day and as it's happening. And then when it doesn't, it sucks. I mean, it's not fun. It's not a fun place to be. I mean, everybody as an athlete has probably experienced that in some way, shape, or form. And if you haven't, you're going to. But it's just being able to not let it knock you down, or if it does, just suck it up, get back up and keep training and try to do everything in your power to allow that not to happen. And I mean, I am continuing to work with my mental coach and have discussions about how we can fix it, what I need to do, how I can develop even a stronger mindset in myself, and instead of like self-sabotaging and creating this bad dialogue almost. And I feel like the mental side of things people don't want to always talk about, because it's like, it's awkward and it's uncomfortable and it's hard, and it's like really looking internally and like what's going on with yourself. And I think over the years I used to just keep everything in. I wouldn't share. I'd like to just, I'll get it together, I'll figure it out. But then now I've like started to learn to express those things, like, this is what I'm feeling, this is what's actually going on. And then you start realizing that stuff's helping you. So then it's like being able to have those discussions with my coach, and then with my mental coach and nutritionist, and those things of like, no, this isn't making me happy feeling this way, and like doing this, like, can we create a different structure that's allowing me to at least feel like I'm confident going into this event by doing these things. And like, but I think that also happens with time and structure and changing things. And I mean, it's a long road and it's hard, but I'm still not going to give up until I'm kind of accomplished the goal I want, or if just other life things happen. But the goal is to continue to keep striving to be the best I possibly can. And I want to go into the events and know I walked away from every workout and be like, that was it. Like, that was the best I could have done, regardless if it was a 12th or a 15th. Like, it's more of like the internal stuff of being happy with the performance than it is necessarily about what the leaderboard says. Like, if I walked away from every event at the games, it was like, man, I crushed that. Like, I'd be happy with how I finished if that's what I felt, but I didn't feel that way. So then it's like, okay, how can I continue to keep refining that and getting better at that point?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that mental side is, I think, always glossed over later than it needs to be, right? You always find athletes later in their career say, man, I wish I would have incorporated this earlier on, how much of a benefit it would have been. Obviously, it's becoming much more available and much more of a tool that's kind of accessible for athletes at a younger age, and they can kind of implement it into the way that they create kind of their careers and their training path. But for myself, and I'm curious for you, Chad, being more of an introvert, being someone that's a little bit more cerebral when it came to training, did you have any outlets with your mental stuff while you were training, or were you basically trying to solve all those internal issues on your own?
I would say that there was no help there. And, even just listening to you talk, Travis, and I appreciate that you're willing to share that with us, that is the major thing that you're working on. Because nobody wants to admit or be seen as mentally weak. And, working on these things and coming out on the other side on my own with no help, I didn't even want to admit to myself that's what I was struggling with, but it was, and I had to figure that out. And the thing is that, especially if you are training at a certain level, or really anyone that does CrossFit on a regular basis, like, if you're out there listening right now, you can say that you're tough. You're a tough person. You're a tough human being. You're mentally tough. So to me, it's not necessarily about being mentally weak. It's about being mentally skilled. And when I understood that and I made that transition in my mind, like, okay, I'm tough. I can admit, I can confirm that I'm tough. I'm mentally tough, but I'm not as mentally skilled as I should be. And when I understood that, that's what led me to develop more along those lines. And that's what you're talking about, Travis, is having the skill mentally, or knowing what to do with your mind and your thoughts to get you to where you need to be. And I think if, more people understand that and take it towards that path. Now, some people may need to be more mentally tough. I'm not saying that, but I think for the most part, like, anyone out there can confirm that you have a high level of mental toughness. So now it's about, even getting a mental coach, like you say, Travis, to help you learn that mental skill, just like you have a weightlifting coach. Or I don't know why you'd want to be better at gymnastics, but you might have a gymnastics coach to be better at gymnastics. So, all those things that we need and we train. And that's what's really cool about CrossFit, bringing all these different disciplines together. And it's just continued to evolve through the years, where, people not only have a CrossFit coach, but they have at some point they get help with their weightlifting, or they have a weightlifting coach, or help with their gymnastics and have a gymnastics coach, and now nutritionist, and now mental coaches. And it's like, takes all these things to come together to be the best that you can be. And that the thing about anyone being the best that they can be, no matter what level you're at, whether you're trying to go to the games or just trying to be the best human that you can be. Like, you've got to pay attention to all these things. Maybe you don't have the ability to pay for a nutritionist or a nutrition coach and a mental coach and all these things, but you better look into them and have some understanding and be working on those parts that are outside of the gym if you truly want to be the best that you can be. And again, hats off to you, Travis, for bringing that up and kind of admitting that that's the biggest hole for you, and that's what you're working on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if you would ask me that probably a year or so ago, I probably would have been like, nah, nothing. Like, I would have just kept it in and not shared it. But I think you also have to, everybody's going through something at some point in time in their career, whether it's injuries, whether it's mental stuff, like everybody has something. And I think it's being able to really start to understand yourself and what you want and what you're trying to accomplish, and then being able to focus on that and find the areas of improvement. Like what you're saying is just like, if it is from the mental side, if it is from the gymnastic side or weightlifting, whatever it is, and start to outsource those things and ask for help. And I mean, you're not, if it's something that I'm not, like, I feel like I know CrossFit, like I know how to get better at CrossFit. I know what I need to do for CrossFit. Okay. Well, with weightlifting, okay, we have a weightlifting coach. I know, like, I need to go see him, or this needs to happen, or from like sprint work and field work. Like, I have a ex-football player that teaches me these things. And then the gymnast, that, like, so there's all these other areas that have to be put together and meshed well. But I also feel like the way the internet works now and everything else, like, you almost have all of that kind of at your fingertips to at least get a pretty good understanding and have a better knowledge base than it would have been 15 years ago, where it was like, the internet's not as big as it is now and it's not as disposable. But I think just taking that time to understand yourself and learn as an athlete. And for me, the bigger thing is just the mental side. And it's hard and it sucks, honestly, because it's like, man, like, I know what's in there. I know I can do it. I know I can like push through and find this, like, I have this drive that I want to do that and accomplish these things. And then when it's not happening, like, how are you handling that? Like, what are you letting the anger take over? Are you letting the distractions get in the way? And then now I'm not even present. I'm not focused. And then all these other areas, then that throws off everything. So then when you're like at the games and you're at the stage, this is where you need to perform. And now you're getting frustrated and distracted, but it's just because of these little things that you're slipping back almost into like old habits. It's just being able to acknowledge those things. How can I stop them? What skills do I need to develop as a mental athlete to fix them and put me in a better place, headspace, if it's putting headphones on, if it's there's so many options that you can do. And it's just figuring out for yourself what those things are. And I mean, I'm continuing to figure those out. And I realized for myself, I don't need to look at the leaderboard. I don't need to look at social media, because it's just causing a distraction for me and taking my focus away from me personally. And then I'm not getting as much out of the experience. I'm frustrated about things, or camera time, or people not saying things, like, and then it's these external things that aren't even factual and aren't even true, but you're just beating yourself up internally and like self-sabotaging yourself, which then is leading you to then getting a bad result. And then you're pissed off from the whole weekend. And then you're like, well, there you go. And now it's like, okay, back to square one. How can I figure it out? And I mean, it's just it's a never ending process. And it's just trying to get as close as I can to that point of like perfection, of like where I want to be, knowing it's not ever going to really be attained, but that's what you're striving for. And that's what you want to accomplish. So, yeah.
Well, Chad, I love the way you put that in there, meant to be mentally skilled. I think that's a really good phrase. I think it's a really good way to be thinking about it, as opposed to being mentally strong or mentally weak. It is a skill, and being able to train your brain and your mind to work in your favor, especially when that pressure is on. So I appreciate you both kind of lending some insight into how you're approaching that stuff. It's such a critical piece to becoming not only an elite athlete, but anyone striving to become better at what they're doing. Travis, we're coming towards the end here. I have a few questions for you. Some normal common questions we ask, but I heard, I think maybe it was Josh Bridges on another podcast talking about a workout that you have done. And I just want to confirm that this is the case, that you've done Karen unbroken with a 30-pound med ball. Is this correct?
That is correct.
Have you done it more than once?
A 30?
With a 30. I've done regular Karen a lot, unbroken.
Wow.
And then we've done like max sets with 20 just to see, but it just gets to a point of, That's
You
like
get bored?
wall,
You just
yeah,
get bored
like
after?
wall balls and double unders are just kind of like my jam. It's just easy, it's natural, it's comfortable. Like I feel like I can breathe, I can just kind of keep going. Like there's not much of a limitation that usually happens in me for those movements for some reason. Like it just
Unbelievable.
nice. And so Max one day wrote it, and I was like, I wonder if this can be unbroken. And then I just started, and then just kept going.
Kept going.
Holy shit.
Ended up doing
So,
it. I mean,
yeah.
it definitely is substantially harder. Like the last, like I always try to look at it as like bits and pieces. Like I don't like to look at it as like 150. I like to look at it as like, all right, 30. All right, now get to 60. Now get to 90. And then I'm like, 90, you only got 50 left, 60 left. You're fine. Just keep going. And then from that point, I just kind of look at it like that versus like 149, 148, like big numbers like that. It's definitely hard, but yes, I have done that unbroken.
That's freaking unreal.
Incredible.
So again, just listeners out there that aren't so familiar, Karen, 150 wall balls, normally with a 20-pound for men, 14 for female. You did all unbroken with a 30-pound med ball. It's absolutely bonkers. So we know that wall balls are not the issue when it comes to any competition type setting. It's amazing.
What was the time on 150 with 20 and 150 with 30? And then with 20, what do you feel your limitation is? I mean, is it like running where you could just keep?
I honestly don't even remember the time. I mean, I just started and
blacked out.
Like there wasn't really like I was just like, how far can you get kind of challenge almost to myself. And then it was like, all right, well, you're almost there. You might as well just hang on. But the 20 is just how fast can you squat, more or less. Like it's just kind of like throw the ball, but land in the bottom of the squat when you're catching it. And you just kind of go. I don't know why. It's just a very easy movement for me and comfortable. It's probably like you guys doing a snatch and a muscle up. Like it's just very comfortable and very easy. Like it just seems so natural and like no issue. Like that's what I feel when I'm doing wall balls and double unders. Like it just is like, man, this is nice. Like I feel like I can recover and breathe, but I'm still working, which is odd.
Well, yeah, a snatch is very comfortable to me, but we're talking about 1 to 3 reps. We're not talking about, like if I do, was it Isabel or Grace? I mean, that's not very comfortable to me, even though those lifts, it's just crazy because it sounds like it sounds like wall balls are to you like running is to Chris Hinshaw. It's like walking to him. It's like nothing.
Yeah, more or less. Like, let me just keep squatting and he's just going to keep running.
Exactly.
Unreal. Absolutely unreal. Well, a couple last minute questions here that we give all of our guests. First one is, which sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
I don't have to say it's split. 50-50.
You're giving a diplomatic answer here?
Oh my.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, when the Olympics are going on, I really enjoy watching gymnastics. I just feel like it's pretty cool. And they just don't show enough weightlifting to ever watch while it's happening. But then when I feel like you watch someone really go for like a world record or something on weightlifting, like it's knowing like what they are actually doing and how heavy that actually is, where I'm like, man, I can't even like deadlift that and you're over here snatching it. Like it's unreal.
That's fine. We can give a half check in each of the box here. Chad's going to try to convince you one way, so go ahead, Chad.
Well, no, I'm taking a chance here because I'm just curious, for yourself, what movements do you enjoy either performing on their own, like training for gymnastics or for weightlifting or within CrossFit workouts?
Like which do I like more?
Yeah, for you personally, what do you enjoy doing?
Probably like snatch cleans for sure.
There you go. I took a chance and
that wasn't the question.
But I feel like I feel like what I like about gymnastics is I understand how hard it really is, even from like
that's hugely important
trying to do the things. And I'm like, how are you physically in that position and still holding it?
Yeah, that's I mean, if you're trying to get people to do manas, you have a pretty good understanding of the difficulty of movement. So
so it's like being able to, I think that's what's exciting and watching it. Cause like lifting, I'm like, all right, I have an idea of like how you're getting into that position. I know what you've been practicing and working on. And I think that's just when I'm watching gymnastics, I'm like, how did they just physically like get their body into, like when someone goes into an iron cross and is just holding it with their hands, I'm like, okay, both of my arms and tendons and everything would get snapped. Like, how are you getting into that? And so I don't know.
Hanging out for dear life.
We'll give it a half check for both of you.
All right.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
We'll take it. We'll take it.
Draw.
Question number 2. Any guests that you think we should have on the podcast? That you think would be a great guest for us?
Is this in CrossFit or is this in
Anything?
Anything. You can think about it, come back to us too. I know it's a challenging one for some people.
Yeah.
I've had some people say like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Like, yeah, that would be great. If you can hook us up, we'd love to have them on.
Quick call.
Yeah, it's not always easy. You can even say yourself, Travis, we'll have you on again. You recommend yourself once again. But
I mean, I've always when people are like, who would you like to have dinner with or something, I've always said Kevin Hart, because I always feel like that would just be someone that I always find very comical. So I could say him, but I'm trying to think of someone.
He's like really into fitness too, right?
Yeah,
He's like super into. We got to get him out to camp at some point.
I feel like so I feel like Brooke Wells knew his trainer or something, or knows his trainer. So I feel like that could be the connection on how you could actually make that happen.
It's possible.
Probably gonna have to be paying some money to get him on.
Yeah, we got to get you and him out to Power Monkey Camp at some point together, and you guys can.
I know I've always seen him, but I've never been. And then,
you got to come. You got to come.
Yeah,
we're not that far away from you. We're in Tennessee too.
Where in Tennessee?
Crossville, right between Nashville and it's about 30 miles down the road from Cookeville, Mayhem.
Oh, so in the middle of nowhere.
It's a good spot. Middle of nowhere. McGoldrick's been out with us a bunch over the years. He's always had a good time.
Yeah, I'll tell him he has to come again.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I really feel like we have a chance for Joe Rogan as well on the podcast and at camp. So we got to keep pushing for all these guys.
That
would actually be that'd be a cool guy on a podcast.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Or maybe
I would love to ask him gymnastics or weightlifting. That's the ultimate gymnastics and weightlifting answer right there. I think I think you give him he should be inviting both of you, so then he gets the best of both worlds, you know? Yeah, exactly.
That's it. All right, a couple last questions here, Travis. Any books you've come across recently that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Champion's Mind. I feel like that's a good one. I don't know who the author is, but I feel like that's a good one. Just kind of depending on what your goals are and what you're trying to. Shoe Dog, that's a great book from Nike. That's a good one.
Yep. Perfect.
Recently, yeah.
No, that's good. We'll add those to the list for sure. Add those to the list. Man, it was a pleasure to get to know you, Travis. Hopefully we can meet in person at some point, get you out there to camp for sure, as we've been talking about. But do you have any parting words for our listeners or anything you got coming up you want folks to know about?
No, I mean, we just got Rogue Dubai. That's about it coming up that I kind of have planned so far on the schedule, and then back to kind of the open and the semis or quarterfinals, whatever structure we get this year and how it'll actually change. But no, I appreciate you guys having me on. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed kind of chatting with you guys and then kind of actually diving in a little into the mental side of things, as it's not something I really talk about or discuss. So, I mean, I think it was cool and hopefully everybody enjoyed it.
Absolutely. That I know that they will. And good luck to you in your training, and enjoy your training up to the Invitational and everything else. And we'll certainly be keeping up with you for sure. Also, guys, for our listeners out there, be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Also, check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. And until next time, guys, thank you all for listening.